So for the DIY kinetic sand, it's also known as crazy sand. It's known as crazy sand because the sand can stick together, it can mold together, um, it can form shapes, but it doesn't stick to surfaces. In that picture there is the supplies that I used. The dish soap did get cut out, but it's that little um, thing by the cornstarch. I couldn't find any small packets of sand, and that's actually the only sand I could find. And so that's the sand I ended up using. So for the experiment, I used sand. And I kind of estimated the sand because she used a package of sand, but I could not find those. And then I took a tablespoon of cornstarch and I put that in with the sand and I mixed it. And then on the side I put a small bowl of water and I added dish soap to it and I mixed it, and then I slowly poured the water with the dish soap into the sand mixture. But I added it very slowly. You're not supposed to add it quickly and you're not supposed to add it all at once. And if needed, you can add more, but you can't remove any of it. And so I thought this was probably the most toughest task in this whole experiment, just because I didn't want to put too much water into it. So in those pictures there, the top one is just the plain old sand and cornstarch, and then that bottom picture is me slowly adding water into the cornstarch and sand mixture. So the science behind the kinetic sand. Kinetic sand is a sand that sticks to itself. You can form clumps and mold it with your hands. This is an example of a dilatant that increases its viscosity under stress. So there in that picture you can kind of see how it started to mold together as I started to play with it. And just somebody simply playing with the sand is considered the stress in this case, so that's what causes it to really stick together and mold. So how does kinetic sand work? It can be molded like clay, but also feels silky. It's just plain old regular sand that has been coated with silicone oil, which is the cornstarch in this case. The silicone doesn't refer to one specific material, but rather a group of materials that contain the element silicon and oxygen, which the cornstarch does. The silicones are polymers, meaning that they are molecules made up of long chains of repeated units, and the compounds are used in all sorts of products, like everyday products, like shampoos, conditioners, um, all lotions, cosmetic products. I even saw that it's in like sealants, which I thought was kind of interesting. Silicone oils have unique properties that can be liquids that flow freely or semi-solids that flow slowly into the absence of pressure. But they will act rubbery, like rubbery solids under stress or under a person playing with the sand. So just kind of an example of like the process that the kinetic sand goes under. Um, you can imagine very long strings of spaghetti. They stick together so they can hold a shape, but place a ball of them on the counter and over time they will slowly sink down into a low pile of just plain old spaghetti strings. And that's just like this in this case. The sand, if you would just leave it there, it will slowly lose its shape. The longer strings of spaghetti hold their shape better than the shorter ones, and similarly, the kinetic sand, the polymer chains within the silicone oil make the sand particles stick together so you can form them into a ball. The ball will slowly flatten out over time, just kind of like what I explained. Here again is a picture of the sand. This case, it's kind of, you can kind of see the sand in there, so I did add a little bit more water. But the silicone oil coated sand particles stick only to each other, not to other surfaces. This is why kinetic sand doesn't seem sticky and is easy to clean up, which makes for a very great toy or pastime for children. Kinetic sand is a diluent material made from an ultrafine sand in a polydimethylsiloxane. The properties of kinetic sand allow it to shape into pyramids or other shapes. And it can also be cut into shapes with a cookie cutter or a mold. I did not try this, but I believe that you could easily cut it with a cookie cutter and then kind of come out just like a cookie.